Welcome back. Today, we're going to be reviewing Azure Striker Gunvolt 3 on the Nintendo Switch. Now, this game is a Mega Man-like 2D action platformer, and it's going to be releasing on July 28th of 2022. It will sell on the Nintendo Switch eShop for $29.99. The game is published by Inti Creates, and it has an overall download size of 2.9 gigabytes. Now, among all the Mega Man-like games, the Gunvolt series is definitely among one of my favorites. Now, will this third entry in the series continue on that legacy? Well, that's what we're going to find out in today's review. Now, as we get started on that, don't forget that if you do like the content, one of the best ways to help support the channel, just hit that like button.
Keep getting stronger. I guess the primal dragon's close.
Now, for the storyline, this game is actually set up a couple of decades after the end of the last entry. And you actually start out your adventure as the new character to the series named Kirin, who has to vanquish what is called a primal dragon. Now, upon sealing away that primal dragon, you discover that it is none other than our hero Gunvolt. Now, I'm explaining this to you not as a spoiler, but rather it's impossible to explain the gameplay of this entry without going over this first. However, I promise there will be no other spoilers. So just as in previous entries, this game will have two different groups facing off, your group the Sumeragi against a new group to the series called the Adams. Now, although there is an overarching storyline here, as in previous entries, it really only feels like it's a catalyst for the action. However, I've got to say that the cutscenes themselves, the voiceovers are very well done, whether you're listening to them in Japanese or in English. And they do a pretty good job of introducing all the new characters and forming some kind of connection with them. Now, for someone who wants to dive deeper into the background of the characters, there's always the chat option in the menu, which will create quite a few new dialogues. I will also say that as in previous games, there's a nice twist ending that is a fairly decent payoff. So if you've played the previous games, you know what to expect here, and this one continues the tradition of having some great voiceovers.
Oh, I'm sure it's a super useful ability. I just can't help but feel
Now if we jump straight into the gameplay. Now let's begin by explaining why I spoiled the fact that Gunvolt has gone through some kind of transformation here. Because that leads us to one of the biggest differences to this entry's gameplay, and that's the fact that Gunvolt is not a playable character in the traditional sense. The main character that you'll probably be playing as for most of your gameplay will be the new character Kirin, who will be accompanied by Gunvolt in what's called a dog-like form. However, as a new special meter is built at the top left of the screen, you will have the option to transform into your alternate form, which is Gunvolt back in his human shape. On this form, rather than a traditional HP bar, every time Gunvolt takes hits or uses abilities, it will deplete the bar. When it hits 0, you'll flip back to Kirin. Now, the overall feeling that this creates is rather than having Gunvolt feeling like a separate playable character, it's more like a rage mode, where as you fill your rage meter, you can get the payoff by having a super powerful mode. But I've got to say, it overall works very well. However, for traditionalists of the series that were hoping to play as Gunvolt himself, they might be left a little bit disappointed. Now, for the rest of the general gameplay, a lot of what you'll recognize from the previous entries are returning here, however, with some improvements. Now, your main character Kirin actually plays out a lot in the same style as Gunvolt does, where she has to tag characters first. However, rather than delivering electric shocks, she uses melee abilities with a katana. One of the huge improvements, however, is that rather than just tagging in a straight line, now you can fire action 45-degree angles either up or down. This really makes those odd enemy placements easier to deal with and also opens up a lot of possibilities for level designs. And in reality, I would say that the level designs here have a lot more verticality than the previous entries in the series due to this new change. Another change for this game is that your traditional attack has been changed to the R trigger, while the A button is now a new dash attack, which basically helps you close the gap between your enemies and even later in the game will be used for platforming. Kirin also acquires new saber attacks after each successful mission, such as a rising dragon attack or a descending blow. On the Gunvolt side of things, once again his abilities remain improved as well, with the R trigger now firing off his traditional lightning and the A button once again doing a dash attack to close the gap with your enemies. However, maybe his biggest change is that he's actually absorbed one of Copen's abilities, that of being able to dash into a target that's been tagged and fire off an extremely powerful ability. Now, the last major change has to do with the upgrade system. Now, rather than having to collect material and purchase upgrades, you receive them randomly at the end of each level depending on how many special icons you manage to find. In this game, they're called image pulses and they're divided into passive abilities and skill image pulses. You can assign 4 different skill image pulses that you can then use with the different directions of the right joystick. These each have their own cooldowns and will refresh automatically when they become available yet again. The passive image pulses are rather equipped and will help you out as long as they remain so. As you progress in levels, you'll be able to equip more at once. You can also further upgrade the 3-star versions of the image pulses to become even more powerful. And one of the biggest abilities in the game is actually delivered through the first image pulse you'll recover, which is the Prevasion one, which in this game, in exchange for talismans, will prevent you from taking damage from any source. It's important to note, however, that the talismans that are used through the Prevasion ability will not recover automatically, and you have to do so manually, just as in previous games, hitting the down direction twice. Now, all these improvements to the gameplay were actually very appreciated and gave a overall very fast-paced feeling to the gameplay. One important thing to note, however, if you do equip that Prevasion ability, I did find that this entry is actually the easiest of all the Gunvolts. However, if you unequip the Prevasion ability, then the difficulty level definitely kicks up a serious notch. But overall, I had a lot of fun with the general gameplay, and I didn't encounter any major flaws. Now we move on to the controls. Now first of all, I would like to mention that out of all the Gunvolt games, this one does have the most complex set of controls. And if this is the first entry in the series you're playing, you might be a little overwhelmed at first, but take it piece by piece and everything will come together quite nicely. For anyone who has played the previous entries, however, I did find that this was a very nice progression, adding an extra layer of depth. Now, first of all, just as in all the previous entries, you can either move using the left joystick or a D-pad. Now, although there are certain differences in how to unleash certain abilities between Kieran and Gunvolt, we will go over the general control scheme here. Now, first of all, the Y button will fire off your tagging mechanism, and if you hold up or down, we'll change it to a 45-degree angle. B will be your jump button, and in the case of Gunvolt, he can actually do unlimited air jumps. Your primary attack button will be assigned to R, and the A button in both characters' cases will be more of a dash mechanic. L button, on the other hand, will be your standard dash, and holding it down before jumping will give you a much longer jump. Following that, we have the X button that will unleash your character's special skill. In the case of Gunvolt, they will rotate automatically depending on how much gauge you have left. And finally, hitting any direction on the right joystick will activate one of the currently equipped image pulse skills. Now, all of this is not the complete list of abilities because, as I said previously, after that, each character has individual, more complex abilities that you'll discover throughout your gameplay. But as I mentioned previously, if this all seems like quite a bit, don't be overwhelmed at first. Once you actually get a few levels down, it'll all come together nicely and it creates a very nice flow to the overall gameplay. But I do have to admit that for newcomers to the series, it might feel like quite a bit at first, especially because you're balancing both characters at once rather than just focusing on one. But I do promise you, once you've got it down, the control scheme works very well, there's no input delay, and everything is exactly what you need to be successful in the gameplay. Now if we move on to graphics and sound. Now first and foremost, probably what's most important here is that performance-wise, everything runs very smoothly. There are no frame drops, and that's exactly what you need for a fast-paced 2D action platformer. Now if we do get to the actual visual art style here, I do have slightly mixed feelings. The reason why is that the environments themselves are beautiful pixel art. Also, the cutscenes and the graphics behind the characters are once again very beautiful and probably the best of the series so far. Where I was slightly let down, however, is the definition on the pixel art behind the sprites themselves of the main character and the enemies. I do understand that they wanted to keep the exact same art style and resolution as the previous entry. However, I do feel it was a missed opportunity to add a little bit more definition, because especially when playing on a really big screen, the sprites of the characters themselves seemed a little bit out of place compared to the backgrounds. Now, it wasn't completely off-putting and it didn't ruin my experience. However, for a future entry, I would really like a little bit of definition added to really make it feel like an improvement to the overall series. If you are, however, a fan of the original pixel art of the Gunvolt series, then you'll feel right at home in this entry. Just get used to those more defined backgrounds. Now, on the sound side, we are treated to a very good experience here, with a great and diverse soundtrack. Now, the bass soundtrack itself is really energized and fast-paced, which fits in overall with the gameplay. As an added bonus, if you do acquire the 1000 kudos, as usual, you'll be greeted with a special soundtrack. And if you so wish, you can actually use in-game currency to purchase additional special tracks, which will cause some variation when you do hit that 1000 mark. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, the voice acting in the series, whether it's the original Japanese or the English voiceovers, they are done with a very high quality and by great actors. So overall, on the sound side, for an indie title, this is a top-notch offering.
Pity parties for ourselves. You better not forget that.
You're right, Kitty. Thank you.
So now we get to the verdict. And if this is one of the first reviews of mine that you're watching, my full review scale is available down below in the description of the video. And in the case of Azure Striker Gunvolt 3 on the Nintendo Switch, I'm going to be giving this game an 8.5, putting it at the high end of a great game. Now, if I'm totally honest, when I initially started the game, I was slightly disappointed that Gunvolt wasn't his own playable character. However, as I got into the gameplay and started experiencing the flow of things, I really did start appreciating the ability to swap between both characters. Also, I really appreciated the new upgrade system. In the previous games, you often had to replay the same stages in hope of getting that right type of material. And it did create a sort of grindy type of phenomenon that didn't fit in with the overall gameplay. Also, I really think that they made an effort to make this entry a lot more approachable by including the Pervasion ability almost like a difficulty choice. For someone really looking for a challenge, you can just remove it. And for someone looking for a more casual or quick playthrough, you can just equip it and have that experience as well. Overall, if you're already a fan of the Gunvolt series, the Luminous Avenger series, or just even a Mega Man fan, definitely give this one a try. It is worth the pickup. So now I want to hear from all of you. Let me know in the comments down below if you think you'll be picking up this game or not. And also, on the way out, don't forget that if you did appreciate the content, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and click on the notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.